We're really excited about this session today, and we're really going to be driving a conversation around AI-powered decision-making. And we're really going to be thinking about all of the things we should be thinking about campuses and how AI is going to really impact. But before we do that, I'm going to have Gabrielle come up and just join us on the stage and tell you a little bit about how to manage yourselves on the Beehive. Gabrielle?
Hi, everyone. We're so glad that you are here with us today. So just to kind of just go through a couple of logistics, you are welcome to come up on stage and join the conversation at any time. Just let us know in the comments. I will be monitoring the comments. If I see that you are engaging, I might ask you to come up. You do not have to accept it, but we would really love if you could come on stage and engage with us. Some people just tend to want to write and contribute that way. And if you are watching from either LinkedIn or YouTube, I am monitoring those as well. So you can pop those questions in those comments. And yeah, we just ask that everyone is considerate of the time that we're given, and just make sure that we give those who want a chance to speak the ability to speak. So Matt, did I miss anything?
No, you didn't miss anything. I want to say, I want to thank the Hug for collaborating with us on this. As you know, we're a big proponent of the Hug. We want this conversation to lead us to topics at the conference in March, as well as all of the sessions that we do with them. We'd love for you to be a part of that conversation. Today is actually really interesting for me because Taj Pirzada from Nike is just a friend of mine who I knew way before he became a leader at Nike. And the concept of AI, he's thinking forward. There is a journey that has been made by Taj, and I'm going to have him speak to that story a little bit. But this conversation is really about how do we think forward? How do we think about using the technologies that's in front of us? How do we wear that future of work lens and then really driving a conversation through all of these things that need to happen in market? Now you might be thinking, we're talking about Nike. Hey, Matt, higher ed isn't a business, so we can't run like Nike. The reality of it is higher ed needs to operate in the most effective manner. We have federal funds that come to us. We have students who are asking us to make sure that things are really effective. These are all things that are really important for us in a lot of different ways. So we're really excited about this. I'm going to ask Taj to come up, and we're going to start a conversation with him a little bit about, what he's going to be doing in terms of thinking about AI, the analytics element of it, and driving that conversation. How's it going, Taj?
Hey, good, Matt. How are you?
Good. So we're really excited about this. The folks that are in the room, I would ask you that if you could tell us where you're from and which organization you represent, that'd be really good. And then the other question that I really want us to kind of talk through here is, what do you want out of this session? What is it that we could really give you in terms of that as we think about AI in a lot of ways? So Taj, let me start this conversation. Your journey as a leader around AI at Nike didn't start by just applying for a job, right? You were around higher ed with me years before that. At some point, I remember that transformation, even when we were together at Deloitte, you paused and said, hey, we got to think about analytics and we got to think about data differently, right? And then you got the opportunity. Give the audience a little bit of that journey, because I think it's an important journey, because I think higher ed in itself has to go through that journey.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, great question. But first and foremost, if you guys don't mind, let me just share with you my disclaimer, which is my views are strictly my own. They do not represent my past or present or future employers in any which way, shape, or form. So again, these are just views of mine, and I've developed that experience over a number of years, and I've known Matt for a long time. And today it's just Matt and I hoping to have a great conversation, and hopefully some folks can benefit out of that conversation. So I was in the ERP space, right? So schools, everybody runs, PeopleSoft, Oracle. That was the sweet spot. The MSAP as well. Always thought about the application layer, right? Always thought about, what can that top end do? And data was always there, and we talked about data, and we thought we understood it. But then I reached a point in my life, probably about 12 years ago, and I was asking around, like, what's next, right? This is the same technology over and over again. The advice that I got was, hey, big data, a term we don't use anymore, apparently was really big about 12 years ago, big data. And I was like, okay, what's so big about the data? So just kind of got into it because of that. And that was, I thought it was just me kind of moving my career one step forward. But then I realized it was almost a change of career. Because the more I got involved, the more I needed to learn how to harness the data, and eventually got to machine learning and, building models on top, and statistical modeling and all kinds of stuff. And then all that today is just called AI. And now nobody talks about AI. It has to be Gen AI, right? So those are just the evolution. But I evolved because I saw an opportunity to kind of do things better. I did not want to keep doing the same things over and over again. That did me well, but again, just being a technocrat and technologist, and just wanting to solve business problems, that was really always something that I've strived to do, which is, what is the business problem we're trying to solve? Maybe because I have an undergrad in economics and I studied computer science for many years. I've been in technology my whole life, but I did understand that conversation. So when you talk to like the C-level folks, they're always kind of concerned about running the business. They're not concerned about data. They're not concerned about, those strategies. They're thinking, how can I increase in higher ed, for example, how can I increase my enrollment, for example? So in terms of the journey, just hands-on senior data scientist, lead, manager, director, and now at the director level, I'm an AI engineer or engineering director, which just means that not only do I get to build stuff, I also get to deploy it, which is really critical. It is critical because normally that 4-month, 6-month window, I can shrink it down to maybe 2 months if we're lucky, or 3 months, because we control our own deployment. So it happens, back to back to building something, which normally probably about 4 years ago, we would have to hand it off to somebody, the enterprise, and they said, hey, we'll talk to you in 3 months. And nobody wants to hear that, but that was the reality. And I wanted to bridge that gap. So again, every time I saw an opportunity, I went and got educated, kept learning, kept getting better. And that's where we are today. So long-winded answer, guys, I'm sorry, but that's
no, and it's a really good conversation because, Taj, and I've been focused on the future of work. And I really believe if you wear the lens of future of work, that you will always start to innovate on campus, in other organizations. And when we think about future of work, the concept is very simple. What is the technology and advancements out there? How do we look at that, and how do we think about that in the way that it could transform organizations, right? You're doing that at Nike, whether, it's how to move, supply chain, move shoes from one location to the other. For us, it's to get students in the door, keep them engaged in the campus and make them successful, and then bring them back as alumni. There's this strategy here. Now, we should be thinking about, how do we use analytics and AI? The one thing that we're always been focused on is been the ERP and the SIS. You were a part of those conversations, right? Those are really transactional processes in a ledgering system that we've been managing for a long time. Whereas with AI, it enables a intelligence platform that uses data from the ERP, the SIS, the CRM, the LMS, to almost inform you in how to make better decisions. Could you speak about that? And as we think about that, there's this framework that we want to just talk through really quick, and I want to just allow us to just go through that really quick and not go dive into it, but it's really about aligning to the strategy of what campuses should do. What are the technologies and the solutions? And you talk about these micro solutions all the time to me. Like, how do we build these micro solutions? And then, of course, the one source of truth you always talk about, and then driving the adoption, right? These 4 steps are really important. Can we, at some point, can we start with adoption about the strategy a little bit? Can you give us a little bit of how do we get adoption, but knowing that there's a strategy involved?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question, and you covered a lot there, right? So when we talk about point solutions, when I'm talking about that, obviously they're once you understand the value of data and you're able to harness it, that there's a lot that you can do. But you have to define scope, and you have to be very pointed, right? What do I want out of this data? Who needs what, and when do they need it? So you cannot do everything all at once, right? Even though it's exciting. None of us have enough time. We don't have enough resources, people, time, talent, right? We just can't get there. But what are the 3 or 5 solutions that you want to build this year, or this calendar year, or this fiscal year? We are on fiscal, so I can talk about fiscal. But at the end of the day, it's really about understanding what the business leaders want. What does the business want? It's not what technology can build. Technology can build a lot, but what does the business want? That's the first thing. Let's say you want to increase enrollment by 2%. Okay, what does that mean? And what are the point solutions that can help you kind of get there? And that's what I think about. And in terms of adoption, to me, it's like you have a solution in place, or maybe you don't, or maybe let's say you have something in place, right? And it works really well. Well, how about if I were to be able to improve that by 20%? Would that be a win? Would that be a solution that you would use? And you would say, yeah, if you increase whatever efficiency by 20%, yeah, sure, I'd love to get my hands on that. Okay, great. So who else do you know who might benefit from this knowledge that we want to build this for the organization? And then you start doing like a people mapping exercise, right? So it's almost like, try to figure out the network, right? Like, what is the network? Who uses this? Who can benefit from this knowledge? What I have found is that if you don't bring in people early and often and talk to them, some kind of a, broadcast once a week, once every 2 weeks, create a RACI, either you're informed or you're accountable, or, whatever that X is on the RACI. I find that there's always resistance at the end. Somebody says, you never checked with me. Why do I need to support you? So my counter to that is like, well, if I check with you early, then will you support me in the future? It's like, yeah, of course. Why not? I don't care. It can be your idea. It doesn't have to be my idea. It's your idea, and you are the business, and you are looking for this. That's where I have found that finding those champions and getting people involved early usually leads to success in terms of adoption. It's a lot of belly to belly, person to person communication, sharing like 2 slides, not 25 slides, right? Just share like 1 or 2 slides, quickly get there and get people on board. Otherwise, people are resistant to change. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, and who you work for. Change is difficult for all of us, myself included, right? I'm in technology. Things change all the time. I don't like it. I'm like, well, I knew how to do this until yesterday, and now I have to go learn some new skills. So that happens all the time. But I think the success of anything you do lies in bringing people along. And that has to be a part of the strategy is, education. So me talking to others, I consider that as a part of the education that I'm offering. And I welcome difficult questions as well. And when those questions are hopefully answered in a way that people understand it, then they become your champions, and then they try to drive for you as opposed to you driving everything, right? So
higher ed has always talked about having this resistance DNA, right? Higher ed is always categorized in that. Do you think that industry in itself also has it too? Do you believe that industry also has that resistance?
Yeah, I mean, always. I've never been in a situation where we did not find resistance. Sometimes the disconnect is between leadership wanting to. I remember in Chicago, in fact, Matt, I was with Deloitte, and the management of this really awesome factory that made like solo cups, like not solo cup, but something like solo cup plastic products. And their whole idea was like, how do we make a dark factory? And we're like, okay, what does that mean? That means like we don't want any employees on the floor. We want complete automation. And of course, the folks are on the ground are helping us kind of, trying to say, how do we get better at what we do? But their leadership was thinking about how do we phase everybody out in 5 years. So that's where the resistance comes in. It's true. There's always there are always issues in any environment. But I think the key is you have to continuously learn, continuously educate, even if it's difficult. It's hard for all of us, right? Like I'm a continuous learner, and even I have to kind of be very pointed. Like, okay, what do I want to accomplish this quarter? What do I need to learn that can make me better at what I do? Because otherwise, all of us face that idea that we might be obsolete. So if you don't have a healthy fear, that's probably not a good thing, because you're then too comfortable, and the world changes all the time, and we have to learn how to evolve and change, right? I'm just being philosophical, but that's my personal philosophy, and it served me well so far.
And I'm going to bring Freddie up in a second. But one of the things that you talk about is, what does the business want, right? Because Nike is a large organization. Higher ed, each campus is a large organization. I always say higher ed campuses are like mini cities, right? So there's a lot of different entities inside of a campus. You know that really well. I mean, you've designed campuses. How does this concept of thinking about strategy, but having conversations with the specific areas, because each of those areas are tasked to do something. Like, so in the world of Nike, I'm sure you have inventory, and then you have supply chain, and then you have folks that are producing the product, right? In higher ed, we have admissions, we have records, we have HR, we have finance. How do you, as a broader scale, how do you start to think about strategy that brings, a unified conversation around strategy, but allows for each of them to individually recognize that this is going to benefit them? Because I think part of when you say, what does the business unit want, everyone's conversation is going to be slightly different, right?
So the conversation is always, I tell people, what keeps you up at night, what bothers you, what is it that you want to accomplish overall, and then what do you need to accomplish in the next 3 to 6 months? What have you been tasked to do? And when they share that, they don't have to share it in tech speak. They can just share it in their business context, because all different areas talk in a slightly different language. Supply chain people talk in supply chain language, right? So just understanding that, and then translating that into some kind of a requirement, or some kind of you want to do X and X plus 5. Okay, how about if I were able to do this for you and it would take me this long? Would you participate with me? Would you help me? Would you be my highly engaged stakeholder? Will you give me a couple of people so I can like field test things with you and your team? And if you get that level of buy-in and engagement, even though you're working for the business, the strategy is, or my strategy is like, how do I kind of hook him in to say, I'm working for you, right? I'm not independent of you. I'm working for you. I'm building something for you. Give me your time. Give me some of your thoughts. We are experimental. We are lab-based. We're working on our laptops. We're building something. You see the reality on the ground. What does that reality tell you? And how do I bridge technology, predictions and whatnot to the to what you see on the ground? And when you're able to make that connection, that's when you truly find success, right? As I said, the solution doesn't have to be a grand solution. It can be something really simple. And maybe those baby steps, like, hey, we've had 2 successes and 3 small successes. Can we attack a larger problem? And I think that's what it is, right? It's building blocks, just always building blocks. It doesn't matter, how advanced the business thinks they are. They only think in terms of the business. They never think in terms of my tech speak. So I have to know that language more than I have to know my own openly. But then under the hood, I'm like, all right, guys, we need to do this. But when you're talking to the business, it's really understanding their hot buttons and then trying to address those in a meaningful way and solving that problem.
Yeah. Freddie, what is your thought on this concept of these different business units, but being able to navigate AI in this conversation? The reason that I ask is there's so many people in the audience that are in IT. They're going to be asked to bring the most innovative technologies onto campus, but each of these units have a particular problem to solve, right? How do you think higher ed is going to think through that while knowing that this AI technology might be point solutions for one element, but it won't work for another element? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, let me piggyback off a little bit what Taj was saying. And Taj, good morning. Notice how Taj framed his journey, which I liked. Right. So first of all, he's talking about data. Right. So, look, higher education, there's a great book called The Monsters of Educational Technology by, Audrey Waters, which kind of highlights it. For the last 100 years, we've had this, this dash to get to a technology that's the magic button. Let me just press that magic button, and ERP is going to solve all of our problems. SIS is going to solve our problems. Big data, predictive analytics, right? And we all know that that's not necessarily true. So I like the fact that Taj starts from the perspective of, well, let's first look at data, because data informs everything. And then AI becomes the enabling technology of that data. And so I like that fact, because I don't think there's any difference between, for example, Nike or any higher education institution. Secondly, what I heard you say, Taj, was that you actually have a title, right? You're AI therapist, of course, but within Nike, you have a job to deploy AI. And I think that in itself, Matt, is already a first step. So I think that might be a difference between higher education today and an industry, is that industry is actually hiring people and training people, and people are training themselves to be, their job is AI and AI deployment. So to answer your question specifically about how is, speaking to departments and how is higher education going to deal with this. Again, I think if you listen to Taj, what you'll notice is that AI is just it's transformational. Don't get me wrong. I believe AI is going to change a lot, but the professionalism and the art and science of deploying AI, Taj is relying on the same IT skills, the same project management skills, the same change management skills that he's been using, over time. I would think, Taj. Right. Yeah, so I think firstly, we just need to recognize that higher education has been implementing technology for many decades. This is just the latest one, and you just need to start. But I would love to see IT departments and not just IT, research departments, administrative departments just start to embrace it and actually start to train themselves, take classes, bring in organizations. And I like the fact, Tosh, that you're saying that, start small.
Taj, one of the things that in our prep, you talked about people mapping. Can you explain what people mapping was to the audience?
Yeah, okay, let's use you as my stakeholder. And you and I are working together, and I'm really excited. And I have a list of folks that we have identified on your team that will be helpful to us over the course of the project. But then the question that I need to ask you is that, Matt, who do you typically work with all the time? Who else will be exposed to the solution? Who do you know might benefit from this knowledge? Who do you think needs to be involved? who else needs to be involved? What do you think their opinion might be if we put this in front of them? Will they be conducive to using this, or would they be challenged? And based on your response, I'm really trying to fish for some names from you, because I want to take that list of people and I want it to just keep growing and growing. Because at the end of this whole exercise, I can have 5 stakeholders or a team that might know what's happening, or I can have a whole department, a whole organization, a whole division. I can have 35 people, even if the solution is small, right? And I've engaged with them. Some of them, maybe it's just once a month update. Some of them it's a bi-weekly. Some of them it's a weekly, and some of them it's every day, right? Every business day through a stand up. So depending on your involvement, I go out and I solicit directly, hey, we're building this solution. Would you like to be a part of this? Would you like to have an opinion? Can you be part of my stakeholder group? Can I inform you typically, or how often do you want to hear from me? Because what that does is people get comfortable with the idea of what's coming, and they even, dare I say, get excited about what's coming, and they say, oh, this AI group is building this for us. And then it becomes they're building it for us, as opposed to they're building something, we don't know what they're building, and we don't know if they're going to use it. So that drives adoption, and adoption is key to success. Otherwise, it's just a science experiment. And we don't want to have science experiments, right? Nobody has the funding for open-ended science experiments, right? Maybe in a research setting. I'm not in a research setting. My research is within the context of the work that I'm doing. But I don't think I have the luxury of taking 3 months and just researching Gen AI, for example. Like, I don't have that luxury. I need to build on Gen AI. So my research is like, how do I build on top of this? But in the end, again, to Fred's point, right, the traditional approach of dealing with people, getting them comfortable, sharing the vision, sharing common values, understanding that we need to move forward together. That is where I have found that you tend to be more successful than otherwise.
Matt, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick. So Taj, how did Nike start? Right? I mean, how did they decide that, hey, this AI thing really is something that we need to take a look at, and we're willing to put the resources and some funding into it for us to start? Where did that come from?
Yeah, it's a part of the company DNA. So we started a while ago. I think we're past, the Matrix. There are 6 iterations of the Matrix. When you finally figure out the movie, there are 6 different versions, right? I think we are at Nike. We might be in our 7th or 8th iteration. That means that generationally, and a generation could be maybe 2 to 3 years. We have been at it for a long time, way before I ever got here. The idea was that we always wanted to be innovative. We always wanted to move the ball forward. We always wanted to have the latest and greatest in terms of what we could do. We always wanted to challenge ourselves. That's part of the company culture. That's part of the DNA. And there are trials and errors, right? Like, you have to be willing to maybe accept failure and say, but failure is kind of like what not to do, which I always think is a strong conclusion, right? So one of the things I've learned over the years is knowing what not to do is also just as powerful as what to do. Because now I know I'm not going to waste my time, my resources. I'm going to, point the team in the right direction, as opposed to kind of getting it wrong. We already got it wrong last time we tried it, so now we know what not to do. But it all starts with your idea that, we don't get it. We don't have all the answers. But one of the part of our DNA is we know we'll get together, we'll work together from different domains. People will come together and we will figure out the answer. That is a part of the company culture and the DNA. There's also ambiguity involved, and people who are successful at our organization typically tend to handle ambiguity well, and they tend to push themselves and people around them that we know we don't know the answer, but let's go figure it out, and whatever it takes, right? Let's go figure it out. That's the magic, in a way, inside of Nike. So it got started a long time ago, Fred, to answer your question.
Gotcha. Okay.
One of the questions, I think it was Tina that wrote it, as they embark on putting an ERP and SIS in, we talked about it being more transactional, right? I'm sure you have transactional systems at Nike, right? How do you wrap around this new advanced analytics or AI-powered analytics around the traditional transactional things? I mean, I'm sure the supply chain has its own set of data structures and so forth. How does a school that's embarking on an ERP, SIS, take on AI at this stage, where it's not just going to be a lift and shift to a set of transactional from legacy to a new cloud? How do you wrap AI around it? So this goes back to your embedding solutions tag that you talk about. How do we tailor that to the schools, and how do we manage that so that schools can really gain something from their investments?
Yeah, so I see it all the time. There's no technology vendor today that does not have a layer of AI embedded, reporting, analytics, enhancements. A long time ago, Matt, if you remember, report writing was really big, right? From an ERP system, they never gave you enough reports, and we used to have teams of people that would just go write reports, right? Well,
but that's because the users kept on changing their mind when they saw
that's true. That's true, right? But I'm just saying that eventually they started putting those as canned reports, right? Like what was custom, retrofitting customizations, right? So again, what was custom, because everybody wanted their own version of that report, and somebody had to design it, and then it was a fixed report. Eventually, the vendor said, "Oh, we are going to put that in just out of the box through all these meetups and hugs and everything else," and that's what the feedback that they got. But in today's day and age, all of our vendors, everybody's coming back and saying, "Hey, we have embedded a layer of AI in here. We have embedded some intelligence. Can you start using it?" We're like, no, it has to go through a governance process, has to go through legal, has to go through, like, what is your AI doing? We need to know before we release it to the masses. But every vendor is doing it out of the box. If nothing else, if all we did was just use that as our foundational stepping stone, understanding what that AI is doing and how it can help through the implementation and usage, I think that would be a great foundational step. Now, what I'm talking about is above and beyond what the box functionality is doing, right? So when you talk about a vendor-led solution, that is one thing, which is enhancing their solution. What I typically work on is more custom, right? Like, which is specific to what the business might want. So I'm sitting in a more, again, remember the 7th, 8th iteration of the matrix. So I'm sitting in a more advanced space because we have already gone through those cycles. But we have vendors that come up all the time and say, "Hey, we have embedded some functionality. Would you please use it?" Sometimes it's free, right? And other times, we know that there's a cost, or there may be a cost coming. Once we get comfortable, we know that they'll say, "Oh, great, now we're going to charge you for it," and it's going to happen. But there's enough AI in there that you don't have to have dedicated teams. You just need a few people that are able to evaluate and are able to help with the implementation. And a big part of that is the change management. So when we go from an older legacy system, or any legacy system, any system that is prior to the current system is considered your legacy system, right? According to me. So anytime you're evolving and enhancing, you always have a layer of change management, right? Otherwise, it's going to fail, or maybe not do as well. Again, going back to adoption. Part of that change management should be, hey, look at all these cool new things we're able to do, right? And maybe that becomes a part of your AI adoption cycle, right? So you're already getting what you want, plus there's a layer, like 5% evolution from the previous version. And this evolution, we cannot make a better report, but we can not make a report, but I can tell an AI engine, this is the report that I want. Can you go create it for me? And that report can be created on the fly, right? That is what the AI piece can do for you. I don't have to build it. I just have to know how to use it. I have to know how to broadcast it. I have to get people to use it, and just be comfortable with it. So that itself, to me, is a big step in the right direction.
But
So
but
you,
what's
yeah, go ahead,
interesting,
Freddie.
yeah, no, what's very interesting, and which I think is an excellent point. See, but you're assuming that there's a robust governance process in place, and one of the challenges, especially with the smaller schools in the U.S., is that yes, there's a governance, but it's not that strict. I mean, just some schools don't have the capability to evaluate new technologies to a certain extent. What will be the impact on the institution? What kind of security concerns? How do we monitor it? What is the ethical use of it? So what I'm hearing you say is that even if you decide not to build your own AI solutions, you're going to use someone else. Your AI strategy then needs to be, how do I adopt this in a secure and ethical fashion?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. And you don't release it to the masses unless you are comfortable, you have evaluated it. And let me tell you something. You don't have to have dedicated teams for every single function, right? You don't have an AI governance team. What you could do is you could have 3 or 4 leaders who stretch, we call it a stretch, who give up 5% of their time or 5 hours a week or every other week to specifically focus on building AI governance or driving some change management strategy. So I'm just saying I have my day job, and then I have things I do to help the organization, because we all care, right? We care where we work, and we want the environment to be better, and we want to move the organization forward. So a lot of times we create what we might just call like ad hoc teams, right? Call it whatever you want, whatever the team is called, ACE team, A team, B team, and let that team kind of go and evaluate something, and then give the recommendations, and then talk about how to implement those recommendations, right? So I'm typically a part of a lot of these things. I just put in my thinking hat on more than being an AI person. I'm okay, am I smart enough to solve this problem, coming together with a bunch of people I may not even know, but that's very typical. Let's get together and solve the problem. But if I'm sitting in my silo on top of this mountain that I have created for myself, I don't think I'm going to be successful. So that is my opportunity. Going back to adoption, I'm getting to meet new people. I'm getting to work with them. I'm getting to solve a problem. If they like what they hear from me, maybe they'll say, hey, next time, Taj, you come to us with something, we're more inclined to listen to you. So you drive your intrinsic value to the organization and to people around you, right? You're as valuable as the people around you think you are, right? What do you serve? What purpose do you serve? And my purpose is bringing AI to the masses. Well, if I don't know the masses, I cannot bring AI to the masses, right? So I'm out there talking to everybody all the time. It's a big part of what I do and what I enjoy. And that, by the way, I'm also highly technical, so that helps.
So you're a little bit of an evangelist in using.
I have to be. I have to
Yeah.
be. I have to be.
So whenever we think about this, and this is the fact that remember, we just named LMSs, CRMs, ERPs, SISs, parking lot, you talk about the admissions applications, financial applications, all of them have some sort of AI inside of their products. Like we know that isn't the news. That isn't going to game change anything. But what you're saying is you're going to need to think through the adoption of those things that are embedded inside of those technologies, more than just, oh, you know what, it's going to improve my financial aid processing. Instead of thinking of it that way, you have to start to think of it more strategically, and putting the guardrails around it a little bit, because it is a newer technology that has to be vetted out, right? So you talk about that. How do you build an enterprise-wide strategy for that, while you're still putting in the micro solutions, this embedded solutions? How do you think about that enterprise-wide? Because you know what? Financial aid is owned by the finance aid director. The HR is owned by the HR director. The admissions app is owned by the admission. Like, how does a campus build an enterprise strategy knowing that the technologies are coming from a variety of different product lines, vendors, their philosophy might be different, their data source might be, and we're going to get a data source in a second. How do you design for that, Taj? With wearing a higher ed lens, right?
Yeah. That's a loaded question. Let me think about that for a second. Fred, do you want to take a stab at it?
No, we'll wait for you.
Oh, okay. No pressure, right? No, I mean, it goes back to it kind of goes back to the change management theme, right? So number one, are we moving forward with these solutions? And if you say yes, because it's something that the vendors have to turn on, right? Sometimes it doesn't come out of the box. You have to turn on that functionality and make it available because it's an enhancement, right? It's almost like downloading a plugin or downloading an update to your Windows, right? It's kind of like that, right? You download that AI engine. So what does it do for us, and how will it benefit us? And then what is the change management around that? I think that is the biggest key. You don't have to understand all the technology because there's a lot of IP protected stuff under the hood that you may never understand. You may have never accessed. You won't have access to all that information. But I typically want the vendors to tell me how I need to communicate this out. What's so special? What's so different? And how do I make this work for the population? And I put the onus on them as opposed to putting it on myself. And then the change management leaders have to understand all that, incorporate that with their own environment that the school has, and then understand what that means, and then kind of communicate that out. Like, these are the advancements that we have made in our technology, in our AI stack, and this is the expected outcome. And it's really important, right? Like, if you if you don't know the value of what it's doing for you, why would you do it? And maybe you don't know the value, you just estimate the value on day one, and you say, okay, this is worth $10 million to us. Well, at the end of a year or at the end of 6 months, whatever the time frame, evaluation time frame is, what was it worth? Was it worth it, right? Like, when somebody says 10, does that mean $1 million, or does it actually mean 12 million? Understanding those financial drivers is a big metric that can be used to kind of measure success. And sometimes I understand schools don't always think about dollars and cents, but it's fair, right? It's fair because somebody somewhere in the organization is in charge of a P&L for the school. So I think you have to have a number of KPIs, and based on those KPIs, and over time, you understand change management, adoption, what is the value that we get back? Because we ask people to change their behavior in some sense, professional behavior, or how they use the system. And we ask them to go learn all these new tricks. Well, were the tricks worth it? And, don't do AI for the sake of doing AI, right? That's a mistake. Do something that works for you. Do something that adds value. If it doesn't add value, don't know why you would do it, right? It's simple. The equation is really simple. Does it add value? Yes or no? If it doesn't add value, maybe it's not worth it, right? Like, sit it out. Wait for the next technology to come along, the next vendor that says this is worth it. So that's what I think about.
Taj, has the focus of your AI work, has it been more on the product side or the people side?
People as in dealing with people, like HR related.
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
Yeah. It has been both. Right now, it's more on the product side, but over the course of my career, I have dealt a lot on the people side and the real impact that it has on people. Be it your benefits plan, be it your 401k savings, be it your some kind of personal employee-based performance, be it your tenure, and in terms of students, we can talk about. Given a chance to enroll, how many will enroll, right? So these are, from the data perspective, it's very difficult to differentiate one data set from another data set. But in terms of the actual implementation, people behavior is the hardest to predict, by the way. If you're 30% accurate, you're a genius. Because we change our tastes and our flavors all the time. What you like blue yesterday and tomorrow you like red, right? So we change all the time. But in dealing with people, right, like, who's most likely to leave the organization? Who should we identify? Who should we keep? How do we get more engagement? As I said, benefits is a big deal, right? From an HR perspective, are you where you should be in terms of your career? in terms of your savings? Would you be able to retire in 20 years if that's your window? What are you below or above the 401k savings that is averaged or median across the country, for example? So there's a lot of opportunities. It's just about what is the problem that you're trying to solve and how does it benefit. Don't solve it for the sake of solving it. Solve it because it helps. It helps, and enough people are convinced that it is the right thing to do. Create a list of, hey, these are the 3 things we're going to solve over the next 90 days or next 180 days. In terms of a school, maybe the window is longer, but that's it, right? You don't have to do everything. None of us are good at that. So
yeah, so Taj, I just kind of wanted to piggyback off of that, because I know when we were prepping for the sessions, there was some discussion that we had, around the data. And sure, we can have these problems that we want to solve. So the first step would be, first identifying those problems or challenges or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the second is that, schools right now, they already have an abundance of data. I think right now, most institutions might feel like they are data-driven, they are data-informed, based on the numbers that they have. But we had kind of talked about this concept of, what is the correct data? What is good quality data? Are we measuring the right things, right? All these different things. So practically speaking, how do you view this partnership with AI, and how could people on this stream start taking action or start using these types of skills right now, today?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to answer the data question first, because I think it's really important. And this happens all the time, right? We're using a data set that the business pointed us to and said, hey, that's the data that we are gathering, that's the data we're accumulating, and we have a boatload of it. And then it turns out, oh, well, that wasn't the perfect data set because we pointed you to the wrong table, and it's this other table. And both these data sets are really similar, and then there's some rows or some columns that are just different. And then both of these might just be views, right? Views is something that you create on top. I have my data, and then I only want a subset of that data, so I create a view. So the point is, your AI solutions now and forever will always be as powerful as the data underneath. If you think you have the right data, the question is, why do you not know that for sure you have the right data? I thought I had the perfect data set until somebody said, wait a minute, we're missing some information. I was like, okay, we're 6 months in, and 6 months is a long time for me. I don't like to build anything that takes more than 6 months. But in some cases, it's a very complex solution. And then we have to go back and say, oh, maybe we were looking at the wrong data set, and nobody picked up on it, right? Not the 50 people who were involved, right? Remember stakeholder mapping, adoption, everybody was comfortable with the data. And then somewhere a flag just went up, and we're like, wait a minute. So I say that to say this, that a single source of truth, you have to have one single source of truth of that data. And then people take it, and then they keep saving more subsets, and they save it, and then it becomes the organization says, oh, we have too much data. But only maybe 20, 30, 40% of it might be clean, might be accurate, might be, what we point to, especially like when you go from one system to the next system. What is the single source of truth? Is it the data in the new system, or is it the data in the old system? And what if both the data was different? How would you know, if, 22% was accurate or 24%? Like, which is the right answer? Is it 24% or is it 22%? And then how do you know that? So again, faulty information is going to lead to bad outcomes, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right? It's always 101 computer science, GIGO. But your solutions are going to be as powerful as your data. So that's really, really, really important. And it's always siloed and sitting in different places, and consolidation and having a very clean layer is extremely important. But I don't remember the second half of the question. So
the concept of data, like I said to you, there's so much data sitting in higher ed. How does an organization even use AI to even somewhat clean up that data or even bring it together? Is there any strategies that AI in itself could help bring, data? Because really, AI is going to be layering over a set of different large language models that have data inside of it, right? So if there's data is dirty, like there's duplicates, whatever it is there ways for us to think about using AI to even clean that? Because when we do conversions to put student systems in, we do a lot of that manually, right? So I'm sure AI itself should be able to do some of those cleanups now, or at least identify the duplicates in some way.
Yeah, I mean, it is the strength of Gen AI. So let's separate AI from Gen AI. So Gen AI can help you with a lot of synthetic data, right? So for example, you wanted to create an identical data set and you don't want to use the actual student records, right? But you wanted something similar, but it's mocked up data. It's called synthetic data. Gen AI can help you do that. Your typical AI, like anytime we build anything, we always think about and I learned this from Deloitte, Matt. Somebody once said, let's do a forensic evaluation of the data. And I was like, wow. And that really sat with me. And like, I never allow my teams now to ever, you know, build anything without a forensic evaluation. I would like tear the data apart and tell me exactly what's in there. But underneath all this, right, it's all statistics. So when you're looking at data, it comes from the data engineering group. It doesn't necessarily mean a lot of AI, right? Sometimes you just use those crude older approaches. Statistically, you got to look at the data and say, I have a column that is not supposed to be null, and I have nulls in there. Well, what happened, right? Like, so it doesn't belong to that data set. It belongs somewhere upstream where the data collection was flawed and somebody made a mistake. We're all humans. Somebody made a mistake in how they mapped the data. And then all of a sudden, something that should, like student ID, for example, if you have a record, you should always have a student ID. That should never be blank. And if it is, like, what do you do with all those orphan records, right? Like, how do you match it? How do you merge it? So just some old-fashioned data cleanup effort. All of it doesn't require AI. It's just statistical distributions, understanding long tails, short tails, the peaks and valleys of your distribution, and saying why is everything between 100 and 10,000, but then I have a value that is 10 million, right? Clearly, that is some kind of a flag, some kind of a typo, data collection issue, measurement issue, right? There are all kinds of issues that need to be mitigated. Less use of AI there. I think traditional approaches work well. So don't try to overfit like an AI solution into a solution that doesn't need AI, right? So
Yeah. So there's a question from William. Higher ed does not like to try things and fail. How does Nike look at what is worth the chance of failure, and how does it benchmark it?
Yeah, that's a good question, but it's a cultural issue, right? Like as a company culture, how can you not fail? Like I can't remember the last time I tried everything in life and I was successful at every single thing I tried, right? It's just human nature that we tend to fail. But failure means you have to contain the failure, right? So don't try something grand and fail. Try something really small and see if it works, and then extrapolate. So if it works for 100 rows, does it work for 1,000 rows? Does it work for 1,000,000 rows? Does it work for 10 million rows, right? So the idea is to contain what might be potential failure. Understand you're going in as an experiment. Understand that when you have those results, I said earlier, what not to do is really powerful. So if you say, hey, we're going to go test this out for 4 weeks, and at the end of it, we'll make a decision if this is something that we even want to engage in. That's how you mitigate the failure. But failure is a big part of learning. Like how can we experiment and not have failure? That to me is not what schools teach us, right? Like not what I learned. Failure is inevitable. Every model, the big joke we always talk about is every model is meant to be broken until you have a new and better model, right? But in terms of cost, right? We also think about the cost of inaction. There's cost to action, but there's cost to inaction. So what is the cost of inaction? Does that make you less competitive? Does that mean your enrollment comes down? Does that mean you're not as premier as you want to be as an institution because you no longer have the technology layer that makes you like this cool tech savvy school? I don't know, right? Like it just depends on what you're measuring. There's always a mathematical formula, even if it's not right. The mistake that we all make is we all look for perfection. And what I have found is I'd rather have progress over perfection. There's nothing that's perfect because things change and evolve all the time. But we need to be able to, just get enough smart people in the room and say, let's just talk and let's come up with a formula of what failure looks like to us. Okay, we don't want to get left behind. The cost of inaction is high, so we have to take action. So kind of like you have to balance that, right? On a case-by-case basis. There's no one size fits all on every project. It never works. Individually, you have to go in and you have to attach the metric to all your work. For example, when we talk about an AI engine with an ERP solution, the cost of not turning that on is like not getting these reports and spending like $1 million getting the reports that everybody wants, when you could have just turned on the AI engine, would have cost you $100,000. And you would have gotten any report by just asking in English, can I get this report with these columns? Oh, great, here you go. So you have to balance that. You have to balance that on a case-by-case basis.
So we got less than 5 minutes, and I know that there's some questions in the chat. One of the things that we want to really tackle is how do you prepare? How does folks prepare for AI? Is it self-learning? Is it upskilling? Like, can you speak a little bit about that? How do you get people? Because we've all learned how, we learned PeopleSoft, Ellucian, Workday. We've all gone through learning that kind of stuff. But AI in itself is totally a different technology. What is your recommendation around that?
Yeah, I mean, learning. So you have to separate out, like the execs at the school, may have a different way or a different grain that they may have to learn. They may have to learn the business drivers behind, what can AI do for me, and what are the business drivers that I'm focused on. Somebody who's more technical may have to go and learn something more technical. Some of this I have found it's best if it comes from HR as a group, that HR says, hey, here are some recommended learnings, not mandatory. Here are some recommended learnings. And if you work with us, we want you to be educated. Schools are educators, right? It's educators. We have to educate ourselves. And, as I said, for some people, it's really high level, more about strategy. Others, it's like actually how to build something and make it work. I think that has to be a part of the fabric, if not today, then at least over the next few years, because the revolution is already here. And like, how long can you keep denying the revolution, right? At some point, you have to say it's here. I was in denial like a year ago. I was like, oh, Gen AI. And now, believe me, it's like nothing I do over the course of my day where I'm not involved in Gen AI. Like I kind of like trial by fire, did not have an option. Might as well learn more about it. But for people where it's not their day job to learn about AI, what are the 5 things you need to learn? What is that 4-slide deck that you have in your back pocket that says, hey, this is what I need to know in order for me to be competitive in my workspace, make my organization competitive, make the school more competitive. Again, not everybody has to learn everything, but to not learn is also kind of bad on us, right? Like we have to make an effort to learn and just get a little bit better, 1% better than you were last year. Even if it's 1%, that is incremental growth, professional growth, right? So.
Yeah, no, and it's really good. So, I really appreciate your time and the conversation we had here. I want the audience to know that we're going to be doing another session, really designing around a student-centric campus on December 17th, similar to the Beehive. We hope that people will join us for that, because the way that we look at things is we want to center around the student and the transformation around the student. So this conversation, Taj, that we had was really about how does AI transform a campus, but we also want to wear that lens of how do we improve the learner's experience, the student's experience as we go on. So I wanted to conclude with that concept of how does AI help the experience. I don't know if you have a last 30 seconds on what does AI do for the experience of the customer, which is the student, right? What is your thoughts on that? And we'll conclude with that question.
Yeah, so be careful, because anything that's customer or student facing runs a higher risk, and you have to have a lot of guardrails in place. So you give out the right answer, you block like bad questions and bad answers. Don't trust AI blindly. That would be a huge mistake. Make sure it's legal is comfortable. make sure you check off a lot of boxes. But eventually, again, going back to a point solution, keep it small in scope, keep it limited. Some folks just like the chatbots they engage with. I still like to pick up the phone and call somebody, but maybe I'm old school. But I do design these, and a lot of guardrails in place will create that right experience.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Taj, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the hug, for being a supporter of the Beehive. We look forward to the hug and other activities we do with them leading up to the conference. So definitely there. I want to say thank you to the team that's behind us in here, especially Freddie, who jumped on. So we hope you will join us on the 17th. And once again, thank you, Taj. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thanks all.